Hello and welcome to the Fighting Spirit Podcast. As always, I'm Jason, and I'm here to bring us the retrospective for Moraes versus Sandhagen, where we had kind of a shaky night, but we did nail the main event, and we'll be looking forward to Ortega versus Korean Zombie, and what will be the penultimate before we get to the lightweight championship. Let's get into it, though. Here's the show. All right, so this event this past week was tough for us. We went 6-7. Yeah, we fell below the 50% accuracy line, but there were so many debut fights and so many fighters that just didn't have a lot of background that it makes it difficult to make these statistical predictions. You know, we saw with the last couple weeks, things were going well. We throw a lot of uncertainty into the mix and we kind of bomb out there. And I think that's just going to be is what it is for, and we've seen this time and time again when we have cards with a lot of more unknown factors. And we just weren't able to pull it out in the end overall. However, well, I say in the end, but honestly, for the fight that had a lot of statistical information, the Sandhagen versus Moraes card, fight, we got that one correct. So, it's just something to keep in mind as anytime we talk about statistics is better available data, the better, more accurate I think we're going to be. Anyways, well, let's talk about the real nuts and bolts here. Sandhagen dismantled Marlon Moraes. Sandhagen looked phenomenal. His striking ability looked really just entirely outmatching Moraes. Moraes did try to land some leg kicks. He did try to land a lot of good kicks, to the head, to the body. He was mostly playing at range, but that range game, that is Sandhagen's domain. He has got the gigantic frame for 135 pounds. He had a solid 3-inch reach advantage, and he just looked better overall. I said it on the podcast before. I thought it was a fluke that he lost to Aljo. That was such a quick ending. I don't think Sandhagen got time to get rhythm, but once we saw him get rhythm, oh man, he looked phenomenal. His striking was crisp. He did have also the one takedown in the match to show off a little bit of the ground game, at least to get it there in the first place, and I thought he just looked phenomenal overall, obviously getting the stoppage early in the second round, and it'd be interesting to see what's next for Sandhagen. Hopefully it's to fight the winner of Aljo versus Jan, because Aljo did earn that title contention spot, so I think that is the fight to make in the meantime. But I could also see, potentially him fighting somebody like TJ Dillashaw soon, because he is scheduled to come back in January. We'll see how things play out, though. Oh, and there's Dominic Cruz out there as well, and they had booked Sandhagen Cruz back before coronavirus. I think maybe Cruz had gotten injured at the time. I'm not sure what happened with that one looking back, but there's a couple of big fights out there for Sandhagen. I just think his best bet is honestly to wait to fight for the title, because I think he kind of earned it by taking out the number one contender at 135 pounds. Either way, though, we did get this one correct on the night. And one that we did not get correct, Edson Barboza defeats Marwan Amirkhani, Mr. Finland. And in this one here, I think stylistically it was just not a good approach for Amirkhani. The big reason I think I had him winning on the numbers-wise is because takedowns are so heavily coveted when you're trying to build an ideal fighter. It allows you to maintain the pace and the rhythm, but when you can't score those takedowns, you're really, really at a disadvantage. And Amirkhani trying to play the counter-strike game, trying to stay on Edson's outside, not being aggressive enough to score clinches. And I know it's obviously a dangerous game to go in and get those against a guy like Barboza, but you're basically resigning yourself to losing if you do not make an attempt. And that's what we ended up seeing here. We saw Amirkhani just not bring the best game plan, I think, to the table. I don't know if he thought he could outstrike or counter-strike Barboza, but the speed and rhythm at which Barboza fights at, unless you're super high level like Khabib Nurmagomedov, you're going to have to bring, Khabib brought the fight to him too. Let's not beat around the bush here. You have to bring the fight to Barboza, and we saw Amirkhani be aggressive in outings past where he was, diving for those legs, those singles, those double power takedowns. But we did not see that in this affair, and Marwan ends up picking up a really decisive loss. So, is what it is. Hats off to Barboza, though. Actually, you know what? Looking at the stats here, it just kind of remind me. Marwan did manage to get the fight to the ground on a couple of occasions, but he did nothing with it. And I think that's really kind of the tale of how he ended up losing this fight. It's, he got it at the end of, I think, round 2 and 1, and took a lot of damage in the interim. So, is what it is. I didn't mean to just, make it seem like he didn't do anything at all, but none of it was effective, and none of it was decisive to win him any rounds. Anyways, moving on to the next one. Marcin Tybura defeats Ben Rothwell. This is one we ddid get correct. Rothwell looked dangerous as hell very early on, but that big man ran out of steam. The locomotive was running out of gas, and Tybura was able to clear him off the tracks by just playing the attrition game, by breaking him down. Rothwell's still tough. I mean, obviously, great chin on that guy, but limited gas tank. After 3 minutes, it looked like Rothwell was already a little too tired to score any big shots, and he just kept walking forward into what was ultimately a brick wall in Marcin Tybura, and he ended up putting the beat down on him for the, I'd say, 12 minutes remaining in that fight. It was pretty much all Tybura for the most part. And the next one we got correct as well. Dracicus Duplessis defeats Marcus Perez, or the Joker, as he showed up at weigh-ins. And the Joker was joked on hard because Duplessis scored a knockout very early on in the first round. Duplessis' striking looked phenomenal. He came in as a real hot product, and we'll be seeing more out of him very soon, I'm sure. On the flip side of another debut fight, we had Tom Aspinall defeat Alan Baudot. Not much to say here. Again, early first round knockout. Minute 35 seconds in, Aspinall picks up a win over Alan Baudot. Aspinall does train with Tyson Fury as far as sparring goes. Not something I took into consideration. It's hard to say, where a guy's skill set, lies because he trains or spars with a high-level guy, but clearly it paid off, and he made Baudot look silly out there, defeating him very handily. And another one we did get correct, though. We were kind of off and on. Obviously, we didn't end up getting the overall edge to the right side of 50%, but we were just off and on, 50-50 all night. And one we did get correct, Ilya Topuria defeats Youssef Zalal. Topuria had Zalal's number all night, scoring 5 takedowns. He went for 5 submission attempts, just couldn't ultimately score the sub, and Zalal looked tough as hell on the mat, not tapping to anything. Even some submissions did look pretty good, but ultimately Zalal just was not able to do enough on the feet, only scoring 4 additional strikes and basically being manhandled on the ground all fight. And one that we did end up getting incorrect, Tom Breese defeats KB Billar. This one, Breese looked phenomenal, again scoring an early knockout here, 17 strikes to 2. KB just was not on his night that night, and nor were we in this fight call. And then we get another one incorrect. Chris Dockhouse defeats Rodrigo Nascimento. So Dockhouse comes in a very light heavyweight, just over the I think the weight minimum. Nascimento came in at the the limit at about 265 pounds, and he showed that the smaller man can still win at heavyweight for sure. I mean, that's guys like Stipe Miocic who do fight similar weights. But Rodrigo, I thought, was going to be able to overpower him, take some of the heavier shots, but that was not the case at all. Once he felt Dockhouse's power, it was pretty much all over, and he ended up going down 45 seconds into round number 1. So a lot of really quick knockouts here, and we ended up getting that one wrong. And another one we got wrong. This is probably the highlight reel of all highlight reels. I had Impa Kasanganay as pretty much our lock of the night. I thought he looked good overall throughout the fight. It was a real even fight. He had the one takedown for Buckley. Other than that, they was striking evenly. Impa Kasanganay did look good, but then that miracle, I don't know, we've never seen a knockout quite like that. Kasanganay catches the kick, then I guess it's a spinning back kick by Buckley. He clips him right on the chin, and it was a hell of a knockout. You could see Kasanganay was out on his feet. He collapsed to the mat and was just stone cold out. Probably one of the highlight knockouts of all time, and it was ultimately in a fight between two guys that are not all that well known. Impa Kasanganay was kind of on an upward trajectory leading into this fight, and I don't think most people knew who Joaquin Buckley was, and I honestly expected Kasanganay to pick up a win here, and it just didn't work out. But this is one of the intangibles of MMA. You can never predict that type of knockout. That is not something that you can ever foresee coming. I mean, that is such a weird, course of events where somebody catches a kick, makes a good defensive move, and then ends up catching a spinning back kick for a knockout. I mean, the accuracy, the timing, the precision of it all, the odds of it happening ever again are so low that this one will definitely be on the highlight reels for some time to come. This is potentially highlight of the decade, and we're just fresh into 2020. So we'll see how that one, I'm sure, for years to come. Let's see. Another one we did get correct. Let's see. We had Tony Kelly defeat Ali Akasi. This was just a solid fight by Kelly. where he was able to work a lot of submissions despite not scoring the takedown. So even though Al-Kasi was going for takedowns, scored 5 of them, you saw 4 submission attempts for Kelly, and is able to turn the tide. So, when you are a high-level submission grappler, you are able to, be competent even if you are not the one to make it your will to go to the mat. So it was a very, very solid win for Kelly, and hats off, we were able to pick that one correctly. Another one we did get incorrect, though. 2 in a row here. Giga Chikadze defeats Omar Morales. I thought Omar Morales was a lock on paper, if I'm honest. Great gym, solid-looking stats coming in, and he was just manhandled. He was knocked down once, and obviously that could have set the tone for sure. But I was outstruck 65-34, no takedowns on the night, and Chikadze just looked like a phenomenal competitor all night. He just had Morales' number, even though I assumed it was going to be the entire opposite. I thought Morales was going to be a little too good to be shown up. So it is what it is. We'll see more out of Chikadze, and I'm sure Morales will bounce back himself. Another one we did get incorrect, although it was a debuter. We got Tracy Cortez defeating Stephanie Egger. And that one, just solid groundwork by Cortez, picking up takedowns to cement the rounds, and also outstriking her 2-1. And then in the last one, which we did get correct, Ulan Bekov defeats Bruno Silva. Again, another debut fight, which we ended up coming in 50% on the debut fights, and missed one extra fight over on the non-debut. So not the best card, not the best data, if I'm honest, either. Not that that's, excuse we can make regularly. We just have to adjust for it. The more information we have, the better we'll do over time, and at least that's what I believe anyhow. 6-7, 46% accuracy, nothing to write home about. So let's get into Ortega versus Zombie. That's where I think we can bounce back a little bit. Here's that part of the show. Alright, so let's first touch on the main event. So we're going to have Brian Ortega, T-City, going to be taking on Korean Zombie, or as he also goes by, Chan Sung Jung, but, let's be honest, he's been going by Zombie for a long, long time. That's how everybody knows him. And in this one here, okay, I'm going to throw a heavy pinch of salt on this one because, in all honesty, I did some other crunching that maybe we can talk about over. Now, let's just say it here. Brian Ortega is the pick, but he's the lowest probability of anybody I have on the card tonight. That's the one I'll share from the simulation modeling that I did. So I have Ortega winning here. He just has a super low percentage chance, I think, to get it done. And it's kind of a tough one because we look at Ortega. His one loss ever. Okay, one loss ever. He was undefeated going into the Max Holloway fight. I know that was a long time ago now. That was back in 2018. December 8th, 2018, Brian Ortega takes on Max Holloway and is utterly dismantled from a striking perspective by Max Holloway. And we've kind of forgotten about him since that time, right? Except for, the it was a Modelo commercial. I think that's the last time we've really seen Ortega very often. But he looked like a phenomenal product. His grappling was impressive. His striking was good. Ask Frankie Edgar, a guy that, is a very competent 145er, 135er, and 155er. Guys all over the place. But anyways, he was able to outstrike him. He was able to out-grapple Cub Swanson. He just wasn't able to score any takedowns. Max Holloway's great, takedown defense. He wasn't able to outbox Max Holloway. But that doesn't mean Brian Ortega is a bad fighter, right? It doesn't mean he can't beat Korean Zombie. But when I look at the strengths and weaknesses of these two guys, right, and this ties into the probability, when I look at Korean Zombie, I don't think Ortega is so much better that he's actually going to be able to out-grapple Zombie. Zombie is one of the best 145-pound submission experts in the game. He's the first guy to ever get the twister in the UFC. Not that that means you're a great grappler, but, when you can pulse that kind of stuff off, it means you get some kind of tools in the kit for sure. And then we look at the pressure that Zombie puts on guys, that constant moving forward pressure. I don't know if Ortega is going to deal with that very well. We saw what he did when he took on Max Holloway with high output volume striking, okay? And bear in mind, too, that Korean Zombie is a bit bigger, I think, frame-wise than Frankie Edgar. And so I think that the striking of Ortega is going to be at a disadvantage here. He's going to be dealing with a guy that just comes forward, stalking, Michael Myers-like, and he's going to be right in the face of Ortega at all times. And Ortega is not going to have that supreme size advantage, okay? That supreme reach advantage that he had. Well, it wasn't supreme, but larger than Edgar. And if it does go to the mat, I think that Zombie's going to have an advantage. So this is one of these tough picks for me. I'm going to overall side with the numbers numbers, the official pick on the card here is for T-City Ortega to edge out Zombie. I mean, like I said, undefeated going into the Holloway fight. Beat a lot of high-level competitors. Cub Swanson, Clay Guida, Diego Brandon's not that high level. Renato Canero, Frankie Edgar obviously knocked him out. And then loses to Holloway in spectacular fashion. A guy that was, 4 or 5. The guy had really done nothing but submit guys or finish them in the UFC. I mean, hell, he knocked out Clay Guida with a knee back in 2016. This guy was highlight reel material going into the Holloway fight, and, he lost, obviously. But is that the tale of his tape? Is he just somebody that loses the guys at the highest level? Is that a fluke? We don't know, but I do know Zombie possesses the skill set to defeat a guy like Ortega, and so it is a tough one for me to honestly put my stamp of approval on, but we're always sticking with the numbers. We're going with Ortega, just no heavy grain of salt. I can definitely see how Zombie wins this one all day, and if I am wrong on this one, I'll say I told you so either way, because I can see both sides of the coin, and again, lowest probability outcome on the simulation modeling. I won't touch that anywhere else. We talk about that stuff kind of on the Patreon more so as far as probability goes, but just bear in mind, Ortega at the bottom of the heap when it comes to that simulation. All right, so we're going to skip the co-main for now, which is Anton Dalia taking on Cyril Gain. That one's going to be a debut match for Dalia, so we'll get back to that one along with the other debuts. But let's move on to Jessica Andrade versus Caitlin Chookagian. So this one here is a really, typical striker versus grappler type matchup here, and it's really going to depend on if Andrade can get takedowns or if Chookagian can prevent the takedowns. So in this one, I think honestly Andrade is going to get some takedowns. We've seen her be effective, be able to get inside, get a leg, and ultimately bring this thing to the mat. I mean, ask fighters like Rose Namajunas, Andrade is able to do this, except against the really highest level fighters like Joanna Jędrzejczyk, where she really did struggle. Now, Chookagian's striking is good, but, let's compare it, let's call a spade here, okay? She has had a hard time against really, really high-level strikers. Ask Valentina Shevchenko, ask Jessica Ai, okay? Strikers that I think are really, really good are able to defeat Chookagian. And I think Andrade's striking is good enough to hang with Chookagian. I think that it's going to, really ultimately come down to if she can threaten enough with the takedowns to bring Chookagian's game away, keep her wondering, worrying, second-guessing. And if she can do that, I think Andrade cruises to victory nicely here. The only thing I want to just keep in mind, though, we have Chookagian as a flyweight, okay, continuing on that track, but Andrade is stepping up to flyweight, so it's one thing to keep in mind. Even though I believe that, honestly, Andrade will be able to do fine here, there is a size differential here for sure, where we do have Chookagian being 5'9", and Andrade being 5'2". So just keep that in mind. We are looking at a real frame disadvantage now, and so obviously the numbers here are for Andrade and for, her background as a 115-pounder. However, Chookagian's firmly been at 125 fighting, really good, the best fighters at that weight class. So, again, grain of salt in this one. This change in weight class for Andrade is something to take into consideration, but I think she still scores the takedowns here. However, if Chookagian pumps that jab all night, she has a sizable reach advantage. Let's actually look up that exact number right here. What is it going to be? It's going to be 6 inches of reach advantage. So if she's able to pump that jab and keep her at bay, it could be her night. However, I think Andrade still gets inside. We're picking Andrade in this contest. All right, moving on to our next one. At light heavyweight, we are going to have Jimmy the Brute Crute taking on Modestus the Baltic Gladiator Bukakis. And in this one here, I'm going to go with the man fighting out of Australia. I'm going to go with Jimmy Crute. The guy's looked phenomenal so far. I know he did lose to Misha Cirkunov back about a year ago, September 14, 2019, but he bounced back against Olenstruck so well. Obviously, he had those great performances against Paul Craig, Sam Alvey, and I think the Cirkunov fight was just a little bit of an outlier here. This guy has 4 knockouts and 4 submissions over his 11 wins. He was just submitted that one time, that Peruvian neck time by Misha Cirkunov. I think he caught him prematurely, didn't have the time to catch the rhythm. And while we've seen great stuff out of Bukakis in his UFC debut against Andreidas Michailidis, I haven't seen enough out of him so far that I think Crute is going to be able to deal just fine with this opponent here, despite Bukakis' great resume coming into the UFC and one spectacular performance. Now, granted, this is only one fight to really go off the numbers here for, But I am still going to side with Jimmy Crute, though. He's looked good against really high-end UFC talent, and so we're going to stick with that pick. We're sticking with the Australian, Jimmy the Brute Crute, in this light heavyweight matchup. All right, this next one here is tough to call. We have Thomas Almeida taking on Jonathan Martinez. And so I am picking Almeida in this one, but he has struggled quite a bit recently. He's 1-3 in his last 4, but he's lost a really high-end competition. Cody Garbrandt in 2016. Okay, that was a while back. Albert Morales, 2016, he got a win. Okay, but then it's still, like 4 years ago. And then he only fights once in 2017 and once in 2018. Losses to Rob Font and Jimmy Rivera back-to-back. Now, we haven't seen Almeida in quite a while, but he was a really hot prospect coming in. I mean, this guy was knocking everybody out up until 2016. He was coming off of 3 straight knockouts, 4 before that outside of the UFC. He just looked really, really good. 17 knockouts, 3 submissions. He's 21-3. And so, he's taken so much time off. I have to assume he's coming back healthy. And despite the fact he could have a little bit of ring rust, I think he'll be able to defeat Martinez. Now, Martinez is not a bad competitor. Win over Frankie Saenz, Pingyang Lu, Luigi Burin. And obviously a split decision loss to Andre Ewell, so it was a very close fight. But I still like Almeida here. I think for his time in the UFC, when he was looking phenomenal up until he ran into some really, really high-level competitors, I think that his numbers speak for themselves, and he'll be able to defeat Martinez. I think when it comes to Almeida, I assume he's getting better. I assume he's being able to get healthy. And I also think that he's not taking on the Cody Garbrandt-level competition in Martinez here. He's taking on a guy that I think he can defeat, and he can show his boxing skill set off to. Even though, Martinez has never been knocked out, he still has 7 knockouts himself over his 12 wins, and so I think he will stand with Almeida, or Almeida will have the advantage. We'll see how things play out, though. We are going with Thomas Almeida. All right, next one here, we're going to have a ladies flyweight matchup here between Jillian Robertson, or I think it might be Gillian Robertson, I'm not sure, taking on Polyana Botello. So in this one, I really like Robertson here, right? Trains the American top team, has great submission skills. However, I think she's going to have a problem when she runs into Polyana Botello. Again, top-tier training, Nova União down in Brazil, 6 knockouts over 8 wins. And I think that she's looked really, really good in the striking game against really competent competition. And I think Robertson, honestly, is going to struggle here a little bit. We saw her get choked out in her last contest against Courtney Casey. Against a really, really competent striker, she did get knocked out by Macy Barber. And I think Botello is going to be able to do similar things to her. I think she's going to be able to box her up on the feet enough that Jillian is going to struggle and have to make desperate shots that may not be able to connect. And so ultimately, I am sticking with Polyana Botello. She's the pick in this contest. All right, this next one here, Claudio Hannibal da Silva is going to be taking on James. He goes by the James Krause. That's a horrible fight name. Pick a fight name that works with your name. Let's see if I can think one up here real quick. You know what? I like James King Krause. There you go. There's your fight name. 27-8, James King Krause. Rolls off the tongue, a little alliteration. Solid fight name. The James Krause. You're not the Ohio State. I don't know who you think you are. Anyways, we're going to see him lose on Saturday. Da Silva, I believe, is going to pick up a win here. Look at the guy's credentials. He's 14-1. He hasn't lost since 2007 in his MMA debut, okay? Process that for a second. Guy hasn't lost since his MMA debut, and it was a disqualification loss back in 2007. Now, he's a little bit of advanced age at 38 years old, but he's beating Cole Williams, Danny Roberts, Hot Chocolate, Nordine Talib, Leon Edwards, okay? He beat Leon Edwards and he was just a baby back in 2014. And despite having a layoff between 14 and 18, this guy has looked phenomenal in the UFC. He's a little bit old, but his striking is solid. His groundwork is amazing. And despite the 14 submissions out of James Krause, I think we're honestly going to see Claudio here pick up a win. Bear in mind that we have not seen any kind of submission output game for Krause at this high level. His last actual submission was back in 2015 against Darren Cruikshanks, okay? Most of his submission acumen was all back at the lower level, tiers of the fight game, be it Cage Titans or RFA or whatever else. That is where his 14 submissions have come. He has not looked high level against the highest competition. And honestly, I think that Claudio da Silva here is going to be able to show James Krause a thing or two once the octagon cage closes. We're going to go with the Hannibal. Da Silva in this one. All right, our next one here is going to be the Iron Turtle, Jun Young Park. Great fight. I love that one. Taking on the Welsh Wrecking Machine, John Phillips. I mean, this is two highlight fight names if I've ever heard them. And in this one here, I like Park here. I got nothing against John Phillips, but he has struggled a bit. Okay, obviously he took on Kamzat, kind of a tough one to judge your record on. So he lost early in that one. Then he picks a win over Alan Admovsky back in 2019, and then before that, 3 straight losses: Jack Marshman, Kevin Holland, and Charles Byrd. So the guy is 1-4 in the UFC thus far. And looking over at Park, I know he did lose to Anthony Hernandez in his debut, but he came back and bounced back so well against Marc-Andre Barrier that I expect Park to stay on this upward trajectory here. I think that honestly, Phillips has just not performed well under the lights, and I think he's going to struggle against Park in this one. I am expecting Park to showcase his striking. Well, it is kind of hard. With his 20 knockouts, obviously the Welsh Wrecking Machine has power, but I think that Park has enough takedown area as well that he could potentially, get this thing to the mat to take away from those power shots of the Welsh Wrecking Machine. But ultimately, we'll see how this one plays out. I still like Jun Young Park here. I think that he can get this thing to the ground. Bear in mind, 3 takedowns on average for every 15 minutes, at least 1 per round in a fight. So I think we're going to see the Welsh Wrecking Machine on his back at some point. Also, bear in mind, he does have a small reach disadvantage, just 2 inches, but I don't expect that to mean too much in the grand scheme of things. So we are picking the Iron Turtle in this one. All right, this next one here, we have Jamie Malarkey taking on Faraz Ziem. And in this one here, I'm going to go with Jamie Malarkey. Now, he did lose his UFC debut to Brad Riddell, but Brad Riddell is a phenomenal talent. And we've also, have a loss too for Ziem against Don Madge. So both these guys, limited information, both losing unanimous decisions. But I think Malarkey showcased better in his debut. I like his, 8 knockouts over his 12 wins. We just have the 5 over 10 wins for Ziem. So we get a little more experience inside of Malarkey, a little higher finish rate. And I think those little edges that come into things are going to play nicely. Also, Ziem, just 23 years of age, is definitely still a prospect. I'm not sure he's ready enough. I like the more developed physique of Malarkey at age 26. I think he's entering his prime, and Ziem still has a little ways to go from an age perspective. So we're going to stick with Malarkey in this one. He's the call. All right, before we get to the debuts, we have to talk about a guy that is amazing on paper and is horrible basically every time he steps into the octagon. I don't know if this is one of those guys who's like a gym class hero. He just performs when the stakes don't matter, and that's why we think he's so good. But it's Gazmarad Antikalov taking on Maxim Grishin. So, Maxim Grishin, he has the one fight against Margin Tybura, looked decent, all right, ended up losing the unanimous decision, but looked okay for a little while. I don't really have too much to say about him. What I really want to talk about is how bad Antikalov has looked in the UFC since 2018. Lost to Ion Kudaleba, lost to Michael Owenstruck, lost to Paul Craig, okay? This guy is a takedown machine, and he's not been able to prevent losing in the first round for the last 3 fights. For the last 2 years, this guy has not gone to the second round, not been able to exploit his takedown ability and make guys pay for it. Now, can you do that to Grishin? Well, Grishin's got 15 knockouts over his 30 wins, 6 submissions. He clearly has a little bit of experience on the ground, but assuming Antikalov can keep this thing on the mat where he does have 15 submissions, okay, I think he can get it done, okay? This, Grishin is a Russian fighter. He would have a similar, kind of background, I think, to Antikalov, who fights out of Dagestan. I think that stylistically for that part of the world, presumably, okay, we can see good things out of Antikalov here. He trains an American top team, okay? Guy has top tier training. He's gotten good opponents. He just has not performed under the big lights. So I think, honestly, Antikalov is the right call here. He's also an underdog because he's performed so poorly. I still think he's good value for your dollar, considering the fact that he's such a big dog and the guy has such a big skill set. I think he could surprise us here, but he also has to surprise us because this guy is looking at Bellator, I think, in his future if he does not do something else to get a win here. So we're going with Antikalov. Just keep in mind, this guy is not performing to his, I think, statistics that we have for him. So we'll see how things play out. In the last couple contests here, we do have some debuts, so let's go over them real quick here. We're going to have Ante Delicia take on Cyril Gane, and this one I like Gane. I mean, that guy is a goddamn wrecking machine if there ever was one. He's only 6-0, but he showcased submission, striking, trains with Francis Ngannou as a fellow Frenchman, and I see no reason why you shouldn't pick him. He is a solid pick if there ever was one. And a few others here. We have, let's see, where is Gamrot here? We have Matasis Gamrot taking on Guram Kutatelade. I cannot pronounce his name very well. Gamrot's 17-0. He looks phenomenal coming into the UFC. I am going with him in that contest. And then the last one to round things out here, I am going with Mark Striegel to take off Saeed Nurmagomedov. I think Striegel gets it done in that one. So let's go over them one more time. We have Ortega, Andrade, Crute, Almeida, Botello, Silva, Park, Malarkey, and Tikalov. And then for debuts, Gane, Gamrot, and Striegel to round things out. Also, keep in mind, I did share some of the probability information. I like Ortega. He's the call, but bear in mind, it's I think a low percentage chance he actually gets it done. We're going to have to see how that one plays out. There's obviously intangibles that we can't track, and that's how Ortega is going to win that fight because from a pure skill set perspective, I think that Korean Zombie outdoes him in both accounts, striking and grappling. So, that one's my most nervous pick of the entire fight card, if you catch my drift. Anyways, we'll be back, obviously, with another show soon. We're looking to really, pick up from our performance from last week. I think we got maybe some better fighters this week. I know I say that every week, but I think this week we are going to do all right. We'll see how things play out, obviously, but I am fairly confident about this one. And we're also going into the Khabib Gaethje card on October 24th. This card is stacking up to be amazing. We got a potential fight out there between Colby Covington and George Masvidal. That one could slot in as the co-main. It's a really late comer if it ends up taking place. I haven't heard anything official yet, and we're approaching. I think we're about 10 days away at the time we're recording this. So just keep that in mind that that fight could be added to it. But it's looking like a stacked card. Gone over it before, but Khabib and Gaethje, obviously, Whitaker and Cannonier, Volkov and Harris, that's a solid fight. Makhachev, Dos Anjos, although RDA's out now, so we got to get a replacement for Makhachev. I'm sure they will. That one is certainly up in the air. Calvillo and Lauren Murphy, Cynthia Calvillo, Lauren Murphy. We're going to replay Magomed Ankalaev versus Ion Kudaleba. We got Tai Tuivasa going in against the human skyscraper, Stefan Struve. Decent contest. And then we have Umar Nurmagomedov making his UFC debut. I believe he's Khabib's little cousin, so he'll be fighting very early on that night and maybe setting a tone for the evening. I'm going to have a lot to say about the Khabib versus Gaethje card, so I'm going to just hold that for a week till we get to the next retrospective and the fight picks. But I think it's going to be an amazing contest, and I don't think it's going to be as one-sided as people think. We'll just leave that as a little preview for now. But until I speak with you again next time, happy fight picking.